Hey folks, I'm a fashion designer, and today I'm going to be sharing some luxury fashion related hot takes. Expect honest critique, nerdy garment construction insights, maybe a few hurt feelings. Now I bet you thought from the thumbnail that I was going to jump on here and be like, guys, this $1,500 blouse that I bought from Chanel is not even any better than this Shein one. And no, I would never say that because it's just not true. And frankly, hot take number one, some of y'all are gullible and will believe stuff like this because the average consumer just does not understand what true quality or luxury actually look like. Now, this is actually an haute couture blouse, so frankly, it's not really a helpful comparison because you're actually just never gonna see stuff like this in clothing you'd buy in a store. I will compare these two directly in a second, but for now, let's compare something that you could actually see in store or even purchase. So, an Everlane blouse versus the Chanel blouse. Some of y'all are gonna look at these and be like, well, they're both button-up blouses, and no, bad. First, you gotta look at the fiber content. So that's easy, you just look at the tag. This one is 100% silk, and this one is 100% polyester. Anytime you have a synthetic fabric like polyester or nylon, or a semi-synthetic like acetate, modal, viscose rayon, my brain is automatically going, not luxury. And a higher end brand would have to really wow me with the construction to convince me otherwise. And a lot of luxury brands do use these kinds of fibers, by the way. Like if you saw my luxury t-shirt roast video, an LVMH owned brand was selling a $750 t-shirt last season made of modal. These brands actually think we're dumb. So yeah, if a luxury brand is going to be using synthetic or semi-synthetic fibers, the construction really needs to wow me. So what makes for good construction or not? Let's return to the armpit of the fashion world for a second. You see these seams here that are just bound with little bits of thread? That is called serging or overlocking. That is about the cheapest way to finish a seam. It is generally durable, but there is nothing special or, frankly, even attractive about it. Now let's look at this Everlane button-up. This one has flat-filled seams, which is the same as what you would have on your jeans. Not only is this a very durable seam, but it looks much prettier and was a lot more time-intensive to do, making it more expensive. So it's a much more luxurious seam finish overall. Also, if you have loose threads, pockets sagging, uneven or ugly buttonholes, these are all construction problems that you should pay attention to. So no, I'm never gonna get on here and say that Shein is better than Chanel, especially not vintage Chanel. Let's get educated before we hop on the internet and defend fast fashion. All right, hot take number two. This one kind of hurts me to say out loud, and I think it's because I maybe don't 100% stand by it, but we have to commit now. I think haute couture is overrated. Now, admittedly, this is a bit of a bold claim for me to make, seeing as I have never worked in an haute couture atelier before, and I've only ever owned one haute couture piece. It is this beautiful vintage Chanel blazer from the 1970s. You can see inside it has these couture sewing techniques, which typically means seam or seam finishes sewn by hand. Now, if we compare it to the Shein blouse, and I recognize that it is diabolical to compare an haute couture blouse to a Shein blouse, one is the pinnacle of fashion as an art form, and the other is, the trash can of fashion. But just to illustrate that they look quite different, right? The Chanel blouse has all this stuff going on inside of it. Hand finishes at the hem, what looks like basting stitches that were for some reason not removed, hand overcasting here at the armpit, etc. The Shein blouse is just serged, which is a type of machine stitch. That's it, that's all. Now, it's not just the seams and seam finishes that make the Chanel blouse more exquisite than the Shein one, and I know I just said haute couture is overrated, and it sounds like I'm saying the opposite of that, and yeah, this part of the video was maybe a little bit half-baked. But there is just so much about this blouse that makes it exquisite, and I do have a whole standalone video on that. For instance, this beautiful fabric is made of silk, and it alternates between a silk satin and a silk crepe. So this like shiny part versus the transparent part within the same fabric. Like this is not two different fabrics sewn together, these are one fabric. So that's really special. The Shein fabric is just a cheap synthetic. There's nothing special about it. And on the haute couture blouse, these hand stitches, which I am about to roast, clearly required a lot of time and skill. In particular, these buttonholes. If you watch my video where I try to recreate some of these techniques, you will see it did not exactly go well for me. My buttonhole really sucked. Hand sewing a buttonhole well on a silk satin, which is inherently a bit of a looser weave of fabric, is very challenging and requires a lot of skill. On the Shein blouse, as I mentioned, it is just serged, which is not a very complicated sewing operation. And then the hem is serged, folded, and top stitched, and frankly, not even very well. Like folding and top stitching a hem requires skill to get it to look nice. However, clearly they were just rushing here because, first of all, the serging is loopy everywhere. and then the hem itself is not particularly even. So this was about the most basic hem they could have done, and even that they didn't do it well. Okay, so you're probably wondering then, why do I think haute couture is overrated? So, okay, I'm gonna be honest, this argument is kind of flimsy, and I'm not sure I really stand by it, and it is largely motivated by my personal dislike of hand sewing, and by my love of industrial sewing machines. I love industrial sewing machines the way some people love cars. And that's not even that weird of a comparison, because the motor in an industrial sewing machine is somewhat akin to a car motor. Like, did you see that? 0 to 60 like that. And it produces clothing. What does your car produce? That's right, air pollution. In fairness, a car does get you from point A to point B, which is probably more valuable to most people than what a sewing machine can do. Anyway, as you can see, I'm a crazy sewing machine lady, but I just love the quality that these machines can produce. Like, look at this buttonhole. This is on the Everlane shirt. It is so regular and even. Now, the Chanel buttonholes, while really freaking amazing considering they've been done by hand, don't quite achieve that regularity and evenness, and you know, they took a lot more time for sure. So yeah, even though you can do a lot of these things by hand and that makes it like, you know, elevated and artisanal, I'm kind of like, but it looks better if you do it on a machine. Now, some people say that the, you know, irregularity and quirkiness of a handmade piece are what make it truly art and are what make it special. And you know what? You're probably right. If you want to fight me in the comments about this take, I'm not even gonna fight back because like I can't really disagree with you. This hot take is a hot mess. You know what though? I will try to defend this position one last time, and it's by saying I really don't think hand overcasting is particularly attractive. I just don't find it that appealing to look at, and there's kind of this convention in haute couture from my understanding where often the insides of garments will not be lined because the seams will be finished by hand. And a lot of times that hand finishing is hand overcasting. And I'm just like, maybe we should line it? Like, what's the point of doing something by hand if it's gonna be ugly? I'm so sorry. Anyway, I don't know if I've managed to convince myself, never mind you guys, that haute couture is overrated. This was a bit of a cold take, a soggy, lukewarm take, if you will, that you tried to defrost in the microwave and it failed, and so now there's one part that's like a little bit too hot and then the rest is just like mushy and cold. Yeah, let's move on. Alright, my third and final hot take for this video, which I don't think is actually going to offend any of you watching, although I guess it could. Third and final hot take is that I don't really like Chanel that much. I frankly don't think it's that great as a brand. And you might be like, well then why do you make so many videos about them? Because they perform well. Y'all like them, and that's why I make them. But frankly, I don't think the collections are typically all that interesting. Virginie Viard, who is the very recently departed creative director of Chanel, and I mean departed as in she exited the brand. She's still alive. She got a lot of flack for, you know, boring or unappealing collections, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, I don't really think that a lot of Karl's collections were any better. He had a lot of showmanship with his runway shows. They were real theatrical productions, which of course I love and appreciate. However, the actual clothes themselves, Chanel has also gotten a lot of flack in recent years for declining quality despite stratospheric increases in price. And I am going to make a video on whether the classic Chanel tweed jacket has decreased in quality over the years, so please subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, generally Chanel has gotten a lot of heat for selling things that are maybe stupidly expensive for no reason. This is kind of tangential to my main point, but I also was followed by a security guard in the Chanel Toronto store, which I guess kind of put me off. I actually asked him if he was following me, and he kind of smiled and left a bit more distance after that. So anyway, that wasn't the end of the world. It was actually kind of funny. I do wish I had been filming though, because that would have made good footage for a video. Although that might have resulted in them following me even more closely and kicking me out of the store. I don't know. Anyway, there are certainly luxury brands that I think are more compelling design-wise than Chanel, like Robert Woon and Thom Browne. And honestly, frankly, really any brand in my opinion that's not Chanel, Dior, or Louis Vuitton. Maybe that's a hot take in and of itself, but I feel like what those three big houses are doing right now and the past, honestly, I don't know how many seasons, is kind of stale and unappealing. Now, granted, two of them did just get new creative directors. That would be Chanel with Mathieu Blazy and Dior with Jonathan Anderson. So we'll see if that helps, but I'm not that hopeful. So there you have it, my very discombobulated lukewarm takes. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.